The small ship, profitable venture wasn't much to look at, even by the standards of independent merchant vessels scraping by on the edges of imperial space. She bore her scars like a drunk bears his bruises, inevitable, ugly, and somehow a point of perverse pride. Hull patches welded over micrometeor strikes made her skin like quilted metal, each patch a different shade of grey or brown, depending on what scrap had been available at whatever port limped into. Jury-rigged systems hummed with the particular note of machinery held together by prayer and desperation, and the kind of determination that came from having nowhere else to go. And that smell, Emperor's Throne, that smell that hit you the moment you cycled through the airlock. It was a cocktail of recycled air that had been breathed too many times, machine oil that seeped from every joint and seal, human sweat that had soaked into the very metal over decades. Captain Riker Atkins had stopped noticing the smell 20 years ago. These days, it was just home. His mechanical left arm whirred as he reviewed the cargo manifest one more time, the data slate's cracked screen flickering in the dim light of his quarters. He'd been staring at the same numbers for 3 hours now, hoping they might somehow improve if he just looked at them hard enough. They didn't. They never did. The prosthetic was crude, all function and no form, a souvenir from an encounter with pirates in the ghoul stars that had cost him more than just flesh. Sometimes, in the small hours of the night watch, he could still feel his original arm, but it lacked the subtle feedback of real flesh. Couldn't feel temperature changes that might warn of a coolant leak. Couldn't sense the subtle vibrations in a bulkhead that suggested structural stress. Little things that might one day kill them all. His quarters were basic, even by merchant marine standards. A narrow bunk with a thin mattress that had compressed to the consistency of plastic. A small desk bolted to the bulkhead. A single pict capture tucked into the corner of a mirror. His crew at their last planetfall, smiling despite everything. They'd actually turned a profit on that run, enough to afford real food and a night of decent armor sec. "Captain!" The voice crackled through the ancient Vox system, carrying that peculiar quality all navigators developed, like the speaker was at the bottom of a deep well. "I'm picking up something on the augers." Navigator Renard Miska, 28 standard years old, young for his kind, but skilled enough to guide them through the warp's hungry currents without losing too much of himself to the whispers between stars. His third eye, that mutation that marked him as both blessed and cursed, was sealed beneath ritual scarring that looked fresh even after years of service. Sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, Atkins had seen him touch those scars, fingers tracing the sacred patterns as if to reassure himself they still held. Atkins felt his meat hand tighten on the data slate, knuckles whitening. Their hold was full of industrial components, coupling joints, pressure valves, replacement parts for machines that kept agri-worlds running. Legal cargo, mostly. The small shipment of luxury goods, tucked away in Hold 3, occupied that comfortable grey area between legitimate and contraband. Recaf that hadn't been stepped on 3 times, real chocolate that hadn't been recycled from corpse starch, a few bottles of armor sec that might have fallen off an administratum manifest. Nothing that would get them shot, but enough to grease the wheels of commerce in the shadow ports. Something. Atkins kept his voice level professional. In the merchant trade, something could mean opportunity or death with equal probability. Out here, in the spaces between systems where imperial law was more suggestion than fact, you learn to read the subtle differences. A derelict might mean salvage rights and a year's wages, or it might mean whatever killed the crew was still hungry. Vessel, Miska clarified, his fingers dancing across his console. Similar displacement to ours. No energy signatures, no heat emissions. She's running dark. Dark ships meant dead ships, usually, or ambushes, sometimes both. Pirates like to play dead, drifting with systems powered down until some poor merchant came close enough to investigate. Then the wolf revealed its teeth. But pirates also meant energy signatures when they powered up, heat blooms as weapons charged. This showed nothing. How long has it been dark? Based on stellar drift patterns. Miska paused, and that distant look crept into his eyes, the one that meant he was seeing more than just sensor data. Navigators saw the universe differently, perceived currents and eddies in space-time that normal humans couldn't even conceptualize. 6 months, maybe 7. She's been dancing with these rocks for a while. 6 months. Long enough for bodies to mummify in the cold. Long enough for whatever killed them to move on. Atkins activated the ship's internal vox, hearing his voice echo through corridors that had carried such announcements too many times before. All hands to the bridge. We've got a situation. They came quickly, each wearing the particular expression of someone who'd heard those words before and knew they rarely preceded good news. Chief Engineer Garber arrived first, his mechanical legs clanking against the deck with metronomic precision. The sound was deliberate. He could move silently when he chose, but he wanted people to hear him coming, wanted them to know where he was. Always. 50 years old and paranoid as a cornered rat, Garber trusted his machines more than any human soul. Half his body was mechanical now, replaced piece by piece over the years as flesh failed or was torn away. The Vox grill grafted where his throat used to be, courtesy of an engine room explosion 15 years back, clicked and buzzed before words emerged in a monotone rasp. What's broken now? It was always his first question. In Garber's world, something was always broken or about to break. The universe was entropy made manifest, and only his constant vigilance kept it at bay. Or so he says. Nothing's broken. We've got a derelict. That changed the atmosphere like a switch being thrown. The bridge, cramped as it was with its 5 acceleration chairs and walls of flickering displays, suddenly felt smaller. Cargo Master Langer arrived next, moving with the controlled violence of someone raised in Necromunder's underhive. Every step was balanced, ready to shift into attack or defense. Every gesture kept his hands near weapons. You could take the ganger out of the hive, but you never really took the hive out of the ganger. Langer had turned raid after a gang war left him the sole survivor of the Rust Eagles, 37 men and women who'd controlled 6 levels of Manufactorum Sigma 9 until the corpse grinders decided they wanted it more. He'd crawled out through a waste pipe with 17 knife wounds and a burning need to be somewhere, anywhere else. That was 8 years ago. The scars still showed when he moved, a map of violence written in pink tissue and badly healed flesh. His eyes found the sensor display and lit up with naked greed, pupils dilating like an addict seeing his fix. Salvage rights. Imperial law is clear on derelict vessels, Olivia Ward said as she entered, her voice carrying the kind of authority that came from actually knowing the regulations. Former Imperial Navy, their Vox operator and Medicae, though she never talked about why she'd left. She had the bearing of an officer, back straight, chin level, eyes that missed nothing. She also had the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen too much and carried those memories like shrapnel in her soul. Her uniform was always crisp, a small rebellion against the general seediness of merchant life. Even here, in the recycled air and failing light, she maintained standards. It was equally admirable and sad. Imperial law is clear on a lot of things, Langer countered, unconsciously mimicking her formal tone. Doesn't mean it makes sense for people like us. When's the last time Imperial law put food in our bellies or fuel in our tanks? It was an old argument, one they'd had in various forms across 100 systems. What you were supposed to do versus what you had to do to keep flying. Atkins let them argue while he studied the sensor data, fingers of his mechanical hand tapping against the command throne in a rhythm he wasn't conscious of. The ship hung there in the display like a hanged man, drifting among the asteroids in a slow dance with chunks of rock the size of Hab blocks. The identification came through after a moment. The Maiden's Sorrow, independent transport, vanished 6 months ago. The name was picked out in faded gold scroll on her hull, pretentious for a cargo hauler. Someone had dreams once. Listed cargo included rare minerals from the Coronus Expanse and archaeological artifacts from a dead world excavation. The manifest value made his organic eye water, enough to clear their debts, overhaul the venture's failing systems, maybe even get ahead for once. She was carrying artifacts, Atkins said, cutting through the debate. Rare minerals, too. Pre-age, according to the manifest. They all knew what that meant. Artifacts meant buyers who asked few questions and paid in throne gelt that didn't require explanation. It meant the difference between scraping by and actually living, between another year of cheap protein paste and real food, between keeping the venture flying and finally admitting defeat. Captain, Garber's paranoia given voice through his Vox grill, each word carefully measured. Ships don't just die, not like that. No distress beacon, no energy signatures at all. Something killed her. Pirates, maybe, Langer suggested, but his hand had already dropped to the knife at his belt, fingers tracing the worn leather grip. Why leave the cargo for 6 months? Olivia's question hung in the recycled air. Pirates don't have that kind of patience. And look at her position deep in the field, hard to reach. If they were planning to come back, they'd have left her somewhere more accessible. Miska stirred at his station, and when he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that made everyone's teeth ache. There's something wrong about her, the way she sits in space, like she's... Like she's what? Atkins prompted, though he could already feel it too. Something in the way the asteroid seemed to give the derelict more room than physics demanded. Something in the way the light from distant stars seemed dimmer near her hull. Waiting. Ships don't wait, Langer scoffed, but his fingers hadn't left his knife. This one does, Miska insisted. His hand moved unconsciously to his sealed third eye. I can feel it. Something's wrong over there, something that makes the warp currents hesitate. The warp. Even mention of it made them all uncomfortable. That realm of madness that allowed faster-than-light travel at the cost of sanity and souls. If Miska said the warp itself was wary of that ship, but they needed the money. The venture's accounts were thinner than void suit material. 3 more runs at current profit margins, and they'd be selling her for scrap. And then what? 5 middle-aged merchants with particular skills and no ship. Might as well paint targets on their backs. Atkins made his decision the way he always did, weighing desperation against opportunity and finding desperation heavier. We investigate. Quick boarding, assess the salvage potential. If it's worth the risk, we take what we can carry. If not, we report it and move on. Captain, Olivia's voice carried warning wrapped in respect. Boarding an unregistered derelict violates. I know the regulations. His mechanical hand clenched with a whir of protesting servos. I also know we're 3 runs from bankruptcy. That ship could be our salvation. Or our grave, Garber muttered, but Atkins caught the shift in his posture. Even paranoid tech priests needed to eat. Then we vote. Democratic process, such as it was on a ship where the captain's word was usually law. But for something like this, something that could damn them all, he wanted their buy-in. All in favor of boarding. Langer's hand shot up immediately, greed overcoming caution. Atkins raised his own, feeling the weight of command like lead in his bones. After a long moment, Olivia raised hers, followed reluctantly by Miska. Garber sat unmoving, augmetic eye cycling through spectrum analyses of the derelict. I register my objection, the engineer said finally, but I'll follow the crew's decision. Someone needs to keep you idiots alive. As they prepared for boarding, Atkins stood on the bridge, studying the derelict through the forward viewport. The maiden's sorrow hung there like a corpse that didn't know it was dead yet, her hull dark against the star field. Something about the way she drifted made his skin crawl beneath his uniform. Ships were meant to move with purpose, even in death. The approach took 3 hours of careful navigation through the asteroid field. Miska guided them with typical skill, but Atkins noticed the sweat beading on the navigator's forehead, the way his hands trembled slightly on the controls. The maiden's sorrow grew larger in their viewports, revealing details that made everyone nervous. Not just the expected micrometeor scarring that any ship accumulated, but long scratches in the hull that looked almost deliberate, as if something massive had tried to grasp the ship or claw its way out. Structural analysis, Atkins asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Hull integrity intact, Olivia reported from her station. Whatever made those marks didn't breach, but Captain, those aren't tool marks. The metal is torn, not cut, and the pattern suggests they were made from inside. Inside. The word hung there like a bad smell. Could be explosive decompression, Langer suggested without conviction. Cargo container fails, contents get blown against the hull. through 3 centimeters of reinforced plasteel. Garber's skepticism was sharp as a monoblade, not without leaving residue. Sensors show no chemical traces, no blast scoring. Something physical did this, something strong. They docked with a clang that echoed through both ships like a funeral bell. The profitable Venture's airlock mated with the derelict's port docking collar, seals engaging. Pressure equalized with a hiss that sounded too much like breathing. Atkins suited up alongside Langer, Olivia, and Miska in the prep chamber, each checking seals and systems with the dedication of people who knew that one overlooked detail could mean death in the void. "Comms check," Garber's voice crackled through their helmet speakers. "Reading you all clear. I'll maintain overwatch from here. Anything seems wrong, you get back here fast." "Define wrong," Langer muttered, checking the charge on his Lars pistol. The weapon was non-standard, heavily modified with parts scavenged from 3 different patterns. It would fire 8 shots before needing a new power pack. He had 3 spares. "You'll know it when you see it," Garber replied without humor. The airlock cycled with its familiar mechanical rhythm, pressure dropping, temperature falling, the subtle shift in gravity as they moved from the Venture's field to the Sorrow's. Then the inner door opened, and they stepped into darkness. The first thing that hit Atkins was the silence. Not just the absence of human voices, but the lack of all the small sounds that made a ship alive. No circulation fans moving air through the ducts. No distant engine vibration transmitted through the deck plates. No electrical hum from active systems. Just dead metal surrounding dead air, a tomb that happened to be ship-shaped. Their helmet lights carved white circles in the darkness, revealing a corridor that should have been a familiar, standard merchant vessel design, all functional metal and exposed conduits. But something was immediately wrong. It took Atkins a moment to place it. No emergency lighting. The backup systems should have kept minimal illumination, drawing from batteries designed to last years. But every light was dead, leaving a darkness so complete it seemed to have weight. "Atmosphere's holding," Olivia reported, checking her wrist display. "Pressures at 70% standard, temperatures just above freezing. Life support is functioning, but barely. If the power's completely dead, life support should be offline too. Unless someone set it to minimum before. Whatever happened?" Olivia's voice was carefully professional, but Atkins could hear the unease beneath. They all could. They moved deeper into the ship, boots maglocked to the deck in the absence of artificial gravity. Each step was deliberate, careful, the kind of movement that came from years of shipboard life. The corridor stretched ahead like a throat, swallowing their lights. Then they found the first body. It floated in the zero gravity. The corpse wore merchant crew blue, the uniform that Atkins himself had worn for decades. But the fabric was shredded, dark with blood that had long since dried to brown-black crust. Multiple stab wounds pierced the torso. Atkins counted 6 before he had to look away. The hands were the worst part. Defensive wounds covered them, cut so deep that white bone showed through the mummified flesh. This man had fought desperately, hopelessly. "Throne of terror," Langer breathed, moving closer with the clinical detachment of someone who'd seen worse in the underhive. But even he looked unsettled. "These aren't from energy weapons. Blades, maybe improvised ones. Look, this looks like it came from a kitchen knife. And these angles," he demonstrated with his own blade mimicking the wounds. He was fighting someone his own size. Same height, same reach. And from the pattern, they knew each other. You don't get wounds like this from a stranger. This is personal. This is rage. "Who was he?" Olivia asked, though the question was rhetorical. The body was too damaged, too long dead for easy identification. Miska had drifted to the wall, his light revealing something that made them all freeze. Written in blood, the letters uneven and desperate. "Trust no one." They pushed deeper into the ship, finding more bodies as they went. Each told the same story, crew members dead by violence, killed with improvised weapons or bare hands. The blood on the walls had dried to smears that looked like madness given form. Some of it formed words, messages scrawled by dying hands. "It's in the walls. Watching. Always watching." "Captain," Olivia's voice was carefully controlled, the tone of someone holding back emotion through pure will. "These people didn't die at the same time. Some of these wounds are older than others. The blood oxidation patterns, the stages of decomposition. They hunted each other, Miska finished, his light playing across a barricade made from furniture and cargo containers. Someone had tried to create a defensive position here, only to be overwhelmed. The blood told the story. Defender driven back, cornered, killed, through their own ship, for days. But why? Langer asked the question they were all thinking. What makes a crew turn on itself like this? The bridge, when they reached it, provided a partial answer. Captain Jeremiah Koss sat in his command throne, hands still locked around the throat of his second-in-command, Lieutenant Myra Valdez. She'd returned the favor, her own fingers buried in his neck. They died strangling each other, faces frozen in rictuses that spoke of terror and rage. The cold had preserved them well enough to see the expressions clearly, not just anger, but a kind of horrified recognition, as if they'd realized what they were doing even as they couldn't stop. "Emperor preserve us," Olivia breathed, and even through the vox, Atkins could hear her voice shake. "Check the logs," Atkins ordered, fighting to keep his voice steady. Olivia moved to the command console, her fingers flying over controls that were standard across most merchant vessels. The screens flickered to life. While she worked, Atkins examined the bridge more carefully. Star charts lay scattered across the deck, many torn or marked with frantic calculations that led nowhere. The navigation console showed course corrections that made no sense. Loops and spirals and sudden reversals, as if the navigator had been trying to flee from something that existed in no coordinate system. One chart showed their route from the excavation site, straight and true for the first days, then increasingly erratic as something went wrong. "Got something," Olivia announced. "Captain's log, final entries, audio and text both." She played the audio first. Koss's voice started professional, the clipped tones of a veteran merchant captain making routine log entries. But gradually, over the course of days, it deteriorated. Ship's log, Day 1. Departed excavation site Gamma 7 with full cargo manifest. Archaeological specimens and mineral samples secure in Hold 3. Crew morale high after successful negotiations with the Adeptus Mechanicus expedition. Should be a profitable run. Day 5. Strange readings on the auger arrays. Navigator Remus reports something following us, but scans show empty space. We're in normal space, but he insists he can feel warp turbulence. Crew is beginning to show signs of stress. Small arguments over nothing. Going to have the air recycler checked. Day 8. Emperor help us. Georgian swears someone follows him through the corridors during night watch. Security feeds show nothing, but I'm starting to. I see things too. Movement in the corners of my eyes. Shadows where there shouldn't be shadows. The men are growing restless, suspicious of each other. I've ordered double watches, but who watches the watchers when everyone suspects everyone? Day 11. Violence broke out during the evening meal. Berger attacked Thorsten with a serving knife, screaming about the thing standing behind him. Security footage shows nothing unusual, but I checked. I checked 3 times. There's nothing there. We're losing our minds, and I don't understand why. Day 13. Remus is dead. Found him in the navigation chamber with his throat cut. The others claim he was trying to sabotage our course, take us into an asteroid field or back to the excavation. But I think, Emperor forgive me, I think something made him do it. Something that watches us from the shadows between the lights. It's always there, just out of sight, waiting. The final entry, Day 15, was barely coherent. They're all dead now, all of them. Thorsten and Glass killed each other in the cargo bay. Found them with hands around each other's throats, just like I know I'll die. Georgian locked himself in the engine room and activated the plasma vents. Took himself out rather than face whatever's hunting us. But it's not hunting, that's the wrong word. It's just watching, always watching, waiting for us to do its work for it. I can hear it moving in the walls in the ventilation system. No, that's not right. It doesn't move, it's just there. In the corner of your eye where certainty goes to die, I won't let it take me. Better to die by my own hand than become another puppet in its game. There was a text addendum, entered with shaking hands. Whoever finds this, stay away from the artifacts. It came with them. It's in them. Destroy everything. Burn it all. Don't let it spread. What came with them? Langer asked, but they all knew the answer would be in the cargo holds. The journey through the dead ship to the holds was worse now that they knew what had happened. Every shadow seemed deeper. Every reflection in the polished metal surfaces seemed to show movement that wasn't there. Once Atkins could have sworn he saw a fifth figure in their group, tall and thin and patient, walking just behind Miska. But when he turned, there were only the four of them. The cargo holds told their own story. Archaeological artifacts scattered and broken, as if someone had been searching desperately for something specific. Crates torn open, contents strewn across the deck in patterns that suggested panic rather than method. Rare mineral samples worth fortunes lay scattered like worthless pebbles. They were looking for something, Langer observed, playing his light over a shattered display case. But what? In the third hold they found it. A stone tablet, about the size of a data slate, sitting untouched in its container. The thing seemed to drink in their helmet lights, creating its own pool of shadows. Symbols covered its surface. Not carved, but somehow existing within the stone itself, shifting and changing when you weren't looking directly at them. Pre-human, Olivia identified, her voice hushed. Definitely Xeno's origin. The Mechanicus team must have found it on the dead world. Leave it, Miska said immediately. His whole body had gone rigid, and through his visor, Atkins could see his third eye twitching beneath its seal. Whatever happened here, that thing's at the center of it. Can't you feel it? It's wrong. It exists wrong. But Langer was already reaching for it, greed overcoming caution. The tablet was worth more than everything else combined. Pre-human artifacts always were. Collectors paid in fortunes for things that predated the age of strife. This thing's worth enough to set us up for years. We'd be fools to leave it. Don't touch it, Miska's voice cracked with urgency. Too late. The moment Langer's gloved fingers made contact with the stone, every light in the cargo hold flickered. The darkness between flashes lasted longer than it should have, and in that extended moment, Atkins saw something that made his blood freeze. A figure stood behind Langer. Impossibly tall, thin as famine, made of shadows. Its arms, if they were arms, draped over Langer's shoulders in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. It had no face, no features he could identify, but somehow Atkins knew it was looking at him. Then the light steadied, and there was nothing there. Just the lights playing tricks, Langer said, but his voice sounded strange. Distant. He tucked the tablet into his salvage bag with movements that seemed too careful, too deliberate. Probably a power fluctuation from the dying batteries. They gathered what they could carry, data cores that might contain shipping routes and contacts, mineral samples that could be sold no questions asked, small technological components that would fetch good prices in the right markets. But the journey back through the dead ship felt different now. Every shadow seemed deeper, every reflection in the polished metal surfaces seemed to show movement that wasn't there. Atkins found himself checking behind them constantly, certain they were being followed. But their motion sensors showed nothing. Thermals revealed no heat signatures, and the only sounds were their own breathing and the magnetic click of boots on deck plating. Something's wrong, Miska muttered, and Atkins noticed the navigator was walking closer to the group than usual. We're being watched. I can feel it, like pressure on the back of my skull. It's just nerves, Olivia said, but she'd drawn her sidearm without seeming to realize it. This place would make anyone jumpy. By the time they cycled back through the airlock to the profitable venture, Atkins's nerves were stretched tight as garrote wire. The familiar smells and sounds of their own ship should have been comforting, but somehow they felt different now. Tainted, as if they'd brought something back with them besides salvage. Get us out of here, he ordered Garber, not even waiting to strip out of his suit. Problems, the engineer's augmetic word as it focused on them. Just do it. The profitable venture's engines groaned to life, pushing them away from the derelict with agonizing slowness. Through the viewports, the maiden's sorrow dwindled to a speck among the asteroids, but Atkins couldn't shake the feeling that something had come with them. In the common area, they spread their salvage on the bolted-down table. The artifacts gleamed dully under the harsh lights, fragments of a dead civilization. each one worth months of operating expenses. The mineral samples caught the illumination like trapped stars, rare elements that would make any metallurgist weep with joy. And the stone tablet. The tablet seemed to create its own shadows, pools of darkness that clung to its surface despite the direct lighting. The symbols on its surface definitely moved, forming patterns that almost made sense before dissolving into meaninglessness. Looking at it too long made his eyes water and his head ache, with the kind of pain that suggested his brain was trying to process something it wasn't equipped to understand. Good haul, Langer said, but his usual enthusiasm seemed forced. His fingers kept returning to the tablet, tracing the symbols without quite touching them. This'll keep us flying for months. Years, maybe. If we live that long, Miska muttered. The navigator hadn't taken his eyes off the tablet since they'd unpacked it. That thing shouldn't exist. It's wrong on a level I can't even articulate. It's just stone with some carvings, Olivia said, but she was approaching it with the kind of caution usually reserved for unexploded ordnance. Her medical scanner was out, taking readings that made her frown. Though I am getting some unusual energy signatures, nothing I recognize. We should destroy it. Miska's voice was flat and certain. Space it, burn it, anything but keep it on our ship. Are you mad? Langer's hand actually moved to his knife, an unconscious gesture that made everyone tense. This thing's worth more than our ship, more than 10 ships. We'd be fools to destroy it. We'd be fools to keep it, Miska countered. You didn't feel what I felt over there. That thing, whatever killed the Maiden's crew, it's connected to this. It came aboard with the tablet, and now we've brought it here. You're talking nonsense, Garber interjected over the vox. I've been monitoring ship systems since you returned. No additional life signs, no atmospheric anomalies, no unexplained energy readings beyond what that artifact is putting out. We're alone. But even as he said it, Atkins noticed something. The temperature in the common area had dropped several degrees since they'd unpacked the salvage. Their breath was starting to mist in the air, and frost was forming on the metal surfaces near the tablet. Environmental control acting up, he asked. Negative, Garber responded after a pause. All systems showing nominal. Temperature should be standard 20 degrees. Atkins checked his own readings, 12 degrees and falling. Check again. Aye, that's not possible. Sensors show 20 degrees, but I'm reading 12 on secondary systems. How can both be true? They couldn't. One system was lying, or reality was becoming negotiable. Neither option was comforting. That night, if night had meaning on a ship in the void, Atkins lay in his bunk listening to the familiar sounds of his ship. But they seemed different now, subtly wrong in ways he couldn't define. The hum of the air recyclers carried undertones that might have been whispers. The creak of thermal expansion sounded like footsteps in the corridors. And underneath it all, so faint he couldn't be sure it was real, something that might have been breathing. He must have dozed, because he woke to find his cabin in darkness. The emergency lighting had failed, leaving only the faint glow of status indicators on his personal console. In that dim illumination, shadows pooled in corners deeper than the available light should allow. That's when he realized he'd locked his door. The manual bolt was thrown, something he never did. He trusted his crew completely, or had until tonight. When had he locked it? He couldn't remember. The action felt both foreign and familiar, like a half-remembered dream. The vox crackled to life, startling him. Captain, Olivia's voice, but something was off. Too calm, too measured, like she was reading from a script. We need to discuss the salvage distribution. Can you come to the common area? Atkins checked his chronometer. 3 hours past midnight. The time when the ship was quietest, when crew members were most alone with their thoughts. Can't it wait until morning? Langer is getting agitated. He thinks someone's been in his quarters, moving things, watching him sleep. That got Atkins moving. Paranoia was contagious in the close confines of a ship. If Langer was starting to crack, it could spread through the crew like a plague. He strapped on his sidearm when had that become automatic, and made his way through corridors that seemed longer than usual. The lighting was wrong. Some sections were too bright, others too dim. Shadows formed in unusual areas. Once, he could have sworn he saw someone walking parallel to him in the next corridor, matching his pace exactly. But when he checked, the passage was empty. The common area was empty when he arrived, lit only by the red emergency strips. Olivia, he activated his personal vox. Where are you? Medicae Bay. Her voice came back immediately. Langer cut himself on one of the artifacts. It's not serious, but I wanted to check for contamination. Medicae Bay, but she definitely said common area before, hadn't she? Atkins called up his Vox log, but it showed Medicae Bay. The timestamp was right, the voice pattern matched, but he could have sworn. Memory was becoming unreliable. That was a dangerous sign. He was halfway there when Miska appeared in the corridor ahead, seeming to materialize from shadows that shouldn't have been deep enough to hide anyone. The navigator's eyes were too bright, reflecting light from sources that didn't exist in the corridor's dim illumination. Captain, Miska's voice carried those strange harmonics again. The artifacts are active. Active how? Better if you see for yourself. Miska turned and walked away, not waiting to see if Atkins followed. His movement was wrong, too fluid, as if he was walking through water instead of air. Every instinct Atkins had developed in 30 years of merchant service screamed danger, but he followed anyway. What choice did he have? If something was wrong with the salvage, he needed to know. The cargo hold was dark when they arrived, but what he saw there made him stop dead in the doorway. The salvaged artifacts were arranged in a perfect circle on the deck, each piece equidistant from its neighbors, and in the center, the stone tablet rotated slowly in midair, defying gravity and sense alike. Its symbols glowed with light. Not bright, but wrong, as if the light existed in spectrums human eyes couldn't see. Started 20 minutes ago, Miska said, and now Atkins could see that the navigator's third eye was visibly straining against its seal, the skin bulging as if something inside wanted out. I felt it through the ship's hull, like a pulse, like a heartbeat, like something waking up after very long sleep. How is it doing that? Atkins kept his hand on his weapon, though what good a last pistol would do against something that could ignore gravity he didn't know. I don't think it's entirely real. Not in the way we understand real. Miska moved closer to the floating tablet, and Atkins saw frost forming on the navigator's suit where he passed through the air near it. It exists partially in the warp, partially here. A doorway. An anchor. For what? That's when Atkins saw it. Not clearly, not directly, but in the corner of his vision where certainty went to die. A figure, tall and thin, made of shadows that had weight and presence. It stood behind Miska, arms draped over the navigator's shoulders, in a gesture of horrible intimacy. When Atkins turned to look directly, there was nothing there. But the memory of it remained, burned into his retinas like an afterimage of something that shouldn't exist. You saw it, Miska said. It wasn't a question. The thing that killed the Maiden's crew, the thing that's going to kill us. There's nothing there. There's everything there, and nothing, both and neither. Miska laughed, and it was the sound of someone standing on the edge of an abyss and finding it funny. It exists in the spaces between moments, in the gaps where trust becomes suspicion. It feeds on paranoia, on fear, on the breakdown of bonds between people. And we brought it aboard. We invited it in. Then we get rid of it. Space the tablet now. Too late. Miska's voice was hollow as a bombed cathedral. It's already in the ship's bones, in the air we breathe, in our heads. Haven't you noticed? The way we're all avoiding each other. The way every shadow seems to hide a threat. The way you've started carrying a weapon on your own ship. Atkins had noticed. The locked door. The sidearm. The way he'd been checking corners and doorways. The slow erosion of trust that had already begun. There has to be a way to. An alarm klaxon cut him off, the sound drilling into his skull like a cogitator drill. Garber's voice boomed over the shipwide vox. Fire in engineering. Someone's sabotaged the coolant systems. The transmission cut to static. They ran. By the time they reached engineering, Garber had the fire controlled, but the damage was done not to the ship, but to what remained of crew cohesion. The engineer glared at them through the smoke, his augmetic eye cycling through spectrum analyses, as if trying to see through their skins to the intentions beneath. One of you did this. His words came through the vox grill in bursts of static-laced anger. Someone wants me out of the way. Can't trust the only one who truly understands the ship, the only one who talks to her machine spirit. Garber, nobody. Lies. The engineer's hand moved to a massive wrench, fingers closing around it. I heard you talking when you thought I couldn't hear, planning to replace me. Younger engineer, cheaper, more compliant. Someone who won't ask questions about what you brought aboard. That's not true, Olivia said, arriving with Langer in tow. The cargo master had a bandage on his left hand, blood already seeping through the white gauze. Isn't it? Garber's mechanical legs shifted, bracing for combat. The wrench rose slightly, not quite a threat but far from friendly. How do I know what's true? My senses say one thing, my eyes say another. The ship tells me we're alone, but I can hear footsteps in the walls, breathing in the ventilation. We're all experiencing, Olivia began. Experiencing what? Mass hallucination, shared delusion, Garber laughed. No, something came aboard with your salvage, something that makes the ship lie to me, makes my beautiful machine spirit confused. Listen to me, Atkins said carefully, pitching his voice to command mode. We're all affected by whatever came off that derelict. It's making us paranoid, suspicious. We need to work together. Work together, Langer interrupted, his hand moving to his knife. The motion was smooth, practiced, a ganger's reflexes coming to the fore. Like the Maiden's crew work together. I've been watching the security feeds, Captain. You've been prowling the ship at night, checking doors, testing locks, making sure we're where we're supposed to be. That's not, but it was true. Atkins had been doing exactly that, driven by a compulsion he couldn't name. And you, Langer turned on Olivia, the knife now clear of its sheath but not quite raised. Always watching, always taking notes. What are you writing in that Medicaid log? Psychological evaluations, deciding who's too unstable to keep around. I'm trying to help, by drugging us. Langer's eyes were wild now, pupils dilated despite the bright emergency lighting. I know you've been adding things to the water supply. I can taste it. Feel it in my bloodstream, making my thoughts fuzzy. That's paranoid delusion, Olivia said, but her hand had moved to her own weapon, an automatic response to threat. Is it? Garber's wrench gleamed in the emergency lighting. Or is that what you want us to think? Classic Medicaid officer tactic. Declare anyone who questions you insane. Neat and clean. This was how it happened, Atkins realized with growing horror. Not through possession or mind control, but by amplifying the tiny doubts that existed in every relationship. By making the impossible seem possible, the unlikely seem certain, the trusted seem treacherous. Everyone stand down, he ordered, but his authority was already eroding like sand in void. Or what? Miska asked. The navigator's third eye was fully visible now, the seal broken, weeping tears of light that left burning tracks down his cheeks. You'll shoot us, like you've been planning. I can see your thoughts, Captain, swimming just below the surface like fish in murky water. You brought us to that derelict knowing what we'd find. You wanted us compromised, wanted an excuse to claim the salvage for yourself. That's the entity talking, Atkins insisted, though doubt was creeping into his own mind. Had he known, some part of him, some desperate, greedy part? It's in your head, Miska, making you see things that aren't there. Or maybe it's showing me the truth, Miska's voice harmonized. Maybe the real parasite is the lies we tell ourselves. The pretense that we're crew, we're family, we care about each other. When really, we're just meat packed in a metal can, waiting for an excuse to show our true nature. The lights went out. In the absolute darkness, Atkins heard movement. The whisper of drawn weapons, the shift of bodies seeking defensive positions, the harsh breathing of people preparing for violence. Someone whimpered, Olivia. Langer, his own throat. He couldn't tell anymore. Emergency power kicked in with a buzz of failing capacitors, bathing everything in red that made the blood on Langer's bandage look black. They'd all moved, all taken positions that spoke of imminent violence. Weapons drawn, eyes wild, trust shattered like crystal on stone. Garber had retreated to his engineering console, wrench in one hand, the other dancing over controls only he understood. Langer crouched behind a coolant pipe, knives out, muscles coiled to spring. Olivia had her back to a bulkhead, weapons sweeping arcs that covered everyone. Miska stood in the center, third eye blazing, tears of light creating a puddle of luminescence at his feet. And Atkins realized he had his own weapon drawn, though he couldn't remember pulling it. "This is what it wants," he said desperately. "Can't you see? We're doing exactly what the Maiden's crew did. We're playing out their final days." "Maybe they had the right idea," Langer said. His knives caught the emergency lighting like bloody promises. "Maybe the only way to be sure is to be the last one standing. Can't trust what you can't verify, and I can't verify any of you are who you claim to be. You're talking about murdering your crewmates. Are you my crewmates, or are you things wearing their faces? How would I know? How would any of us know? The entity could be any of us, all of us, none of us." The entity fed on that uncertainty. Atkins could feel its presence now, not as a physical thing, but as a weight in the air, a thickness in the shadows, a pressure in his mind. It didn't need to do anything but exist and let human nature take its course. Suspicion was a virus, and they were all infected. "The tablet," Olivia said suddenly, her voice cutting through the spiral of paranoia. "It's the anchor. If we can destroy it—" "You're not touching it," Langer snarled, shifting position to block any route to the cargo hold. "That tablet's worth everything, our future, our freedom. You just want it for yourself." "I want to save us." A likely story. Garber's paranoia had found a new target, augmetic eye focusing on the Medicae. Medicae officer suggests destroying our most valuable salvage, almost like you planned this. Bring us to the derelict, drive us mad, claim everything for yourself when we're dead. That's insane. Is it? The engineer's fingers flew over his console, and Atkins heard bulkheads sealing throughout the ship. "You knew about the Maiden's sorrow. You've known all along. Navy training includes Xeno's identification, artifact assessment. You recognized what that tablet was the moment you saw it. I told you it was pre-human. You told us what you wanted us to know." Garber's voice rose to a shriek of static. "Just enough truth to seem honest, not enough to warn us. Classic intel operative behavior. I was never intelligence. Then why won't you talk about why you left the Navy?" Langer had joined the attack, paranoia finding a common target. "Honorable discharge," you said, but you flinch at certain Vox frequencies. You know protocols that aren't taught to regular officers. You're trained in ways that speak of darker purposes. They were spiraling. Atkins could see it. Each accusation breeding more suspicion, each denial sounding more like guilt. The entity had them dancing to its tune, and they couldn't seem to stop. Worse, the accusations had enough grains of truth to them to be plausible. Olivia did no more than a simple Medicae officer should. Her Navy record was sealed in ways that suggested classification beyond her stated rank. "Enough!" Atkins raised his voice and his weapon, trying to restore some semblance of order. "Everyone back to quarters. Now, we'll deal with this in the morning when heads are clearer." "So you can pick us off one by one?" Miska asked. The navigator's head tilted at an angle that made Atkins's neck ache in sympathy. "Visit us in the night. Make sure we don't wake up. I can see the future, Captain. Multiple futures, all branching from this moment like veins in a leaf. And in every one of them, there's blood on the bulkheads, bodies in the corridors, and something in the shadows feeding on our fear. Then we change the future. The future can't be changed, only experienced." Miska's third eye blazed brighter. "And I choose to experience it on my terms." He moved faster than any baseline human should, diving for the engineering console. His fingers flew over controls with inhuman precision, implementing changes that made every alarm in the section scream. Garber roared in outrage, more machine than man in that moment. "Get away from there. You're contaminating the systems. You're killing my ship." Garber swung his wrench with mechanical force. Miska tried to dodge, but the navigator's prescience failed him, or perhaps he saw his death coming and accepted it. The tool caught him, slamming him into a bulkhead with bone-crushing force. His head hit metal with a wet crack. "Miska!" Olivia rushed to him, Medicae instincts overriding paranoia. But even as she knelt beside him, they could all see it was too late. The navigator's third eye stared sightlessly at nothing, its light fading like a dying star. "Murderer," Langer breathed, knives shifting in his grip. "He was sabotaging my engines." Garber's voice through the Vox grill was pure static-laced justification. I had to protect the ship. She's all that matters. The only pure thing left. Garber's augmetic eye swiveled to focus on each of them in turn, bringing us to that derelict, exposing us to contamination. The machine spirit agrees. You all have to go, have to be cleansed, purified, made into something better. The engineer's mechanical legs shifted, pistons hissing as they braced for a charge. The ship needs purity, needs cleansing, needs to be free. Langer's knife took him in the throat, slipping between metal-augmented plates. The blade found the gap where flesh met machine, severing connections that were both biological and technological. He toppled backward, hydraulic fluid mixing with blood on the deck in patterns that looked almost artistic. Always hated that paranoid bastard, Langer said conversationally, pulling his knife free and wiping it clean on his pants. Never trusted anyone who loved machines more than people. Now then, about that salvage. 2 dead in as many minutes. The entity's presence was almost palpable now, a weight that pressed against sanity itself. Atkins could see it more clearly. Not quite physical, not quite there, but undeniably real. It stood in the corners where shadows gathered, tall and patient and hungry, feeding on the fear, the violence, the shattered trust. We need to work together, Olivia said, but her weapon was pointed at Langer, her finger on the trigger. It's the only way. Work together. Langer laughed, the sound sharp as his blades. Like Miska and Garber worked together, like the Maiden's crew worked together. No thanks. I've survived this long by trusting my instincts, and my instincts say you're both compromised. I'm taking the tablet and a shuttle. Anyone tries to stop me dies. Langer, please. Please what? Trust you. Trust him. The cargo master's eyes were wild, seeing enemies in every shadow. I've survived gang wars, Captain. I know how this ends. Last man standing takes the prize. Always been that way, always will be. He backed toward the exit, knives weaving defensive patterns in the air. I'm going to the shuttle bay. Follow me and I'll gut you like those poor bastards on the Maiden. Stay here, kill each other, I don't care, I'm gone. He vanished into the corridors. Atkins started to follow, but Olivia grabbed his arm. Let him go, we need to think. Think about what? We're down to 3 crew, the ship's compromised, and that thing is getting stronger. He could feel it, growing fat on their fear and violence. Then we stop feeding it. She holstered her weapon deliberately, though Atkins could see the effort it took. Fear and paranoia make it stronger, so we don't give in. We trust each other, even if every instinct says not to. Easy to say. But Atkins holstered his own weapon, the metal clicking against its holster with finality. Harder to do when shadows move and dead friends stare with accusing eyes. The entity can't kill us directly. It needs us to kill each other. She moved to the engineering console, checking Miska's modifications. He was trying to boost our Geller field generators, create a localized reality bubble to push the entity out. Geller fields only work in the warp. The entity exists partially in the warp. It's not fully real, not fully here. Her fingers flew over controls, implementing changes that made the air itself seem to thicken. If we can create a strong enough field, we might be able to force it out of phase with our reality. An explosion rocked the ship, the sound traveling through the hull like a death scream. Alarms blared as damage reports flooded every screen. The shuttle bay. Langer, Atkins breathed. They ran through corridors that strobed with emergency lighting, past sealed bulkheads and doors that Garber's paranoia had locked. The shuttle bay was a twisted mess of metal and escaping atmosphere when they reached it. The shuttle itself was half-melted slag, its drives having overloaded catastrophically. The blast doors had held, but barely. Of Langer, there was no sign except organic matter painted across the walls in patterns that suggested he'd been standing directly behind the drives when they blew. Atkins sealed the breach with emergency protocols, his fingers moving automatically through procedures drilled into him over decades. Doesn't matter now. He's gone. 3 crew dead in less than an hour. Just like the Maiden's sorrow, fear and paranoia accomplishing what no external enemy could. And in the shadows, patient and pleased, the entity waited for the final act. We need to get to the bridge, Olivia said. If I can implement Miska's modifications ship-wide. If you're really Olivia. The words hung between them like a blade. She turned slowly, and Atkins saw his own doubts reflected in her eyes. The terrible question that the entity had planted in both their minds. How do we know? She asked softly. How do we know we're still us? That we're not already compromised, dancing to its tune? That we're not about to kill each other just like all the rest? We don't. Simple truth, terrifying in its implications. But we act as if we are. As if trust still means something. As if we're still the people who have served together for 7 years. Even if it gets us killed. Especially then. Atkins forced himself to turn his back on her, the hardest thing he'd ever done. Every instinct screamed danger. Every nerve begged him to keep her in sight, to be ready when she inevitably attacked. But he walked toward the bridge with measured steps, leaving himself completely vulnerable. Because if we can't trust, then we're already dead. He heard her follow, heard the soft sound of her breathing, the whisper of her uniform against itself. His back tingled with the expectation of a blade, a shot, a killing blow. But it didn't come. They moved through the dying ship together. Life support was failing in sections, Garber's final revenge. Temperature dropping as heating elements shut down. In the shadows, the entity grew bolder, no longer hiding but walking openly alongside them. The bridge was a sanctuary of failing systems and desperate hope. Olivia worked frantically, implementing modifications she only half understood, while Atkins fought to keep basic operations online. Around them, the entity circled like a predator scenting blood. Almost there, Olivia muttered, sweat beading on her forehead despite the dropping temperature. If I can just... The lights died. Not just dimmed, not just flickered, died completely. In the absolute darkness, Atkins heard movement that wasn't Olivia, breathing that wasn't his own. The entity was done waiting. When emergency power restored minimal lighting, Olivia was backed against a console, eyes wide with terror. The entity stood before her, no longer content to lurk in shadows. It had form now, or the suggestion of form. You can't have her, Atkins said, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. Up close, he could see it more clearly, though his mind rebelled at processing what he saw. It wasn't a creature exactly, but a concept given form. It was every doubt about a friend's loyalty, every midnight suspicion, every paranoid thought that had ever crossed a human mind. It was the fear that anyone could betray, anyone could turn, anyone could be the enemy, and it was hungry. You brought me here, it said without speaking, its voice the whisper of suspicion in the back of the mind. Your greed, your desperation. Just as the crew before you, just as crews yet to come, I am patient. I am the truth that waits in every heart. You're not truth, you're just fear. Atkins moved to stand beside Olivia, not touching but close enough to feel her warmth. And fear only has the power we give it. Nothing more, nothing less, and we choose not to feed you anymore. Olivia's voice was steady now, her hands flying over the console. She completed the sequence. Throughout the ship, modified Gellerfield generators hummed to life, drawing power from failing systems in one last, desperate gambit. The effect was immediate and violent. Reality asserted itself like a hammer blow, driving back the shadows where uncertainty lived. The entity's form wavered, becoming less solid. The temperature rose 10 degrees in as many seconds. We need to end it. Atkins moved to the console, calling up the cargo bay controls. His fingers hovered over the jettison commands. Everything, all of it, every piece of salvage. His finger came down. The cargo bay doors blew open, venting everything into the void, artifacts worth fortunes, minerals worth more, and the tablet that had brought death to 2 crews. The entity's scream was the sound of every friendship that had ever died to suspicion, every bond broken by doubt. Its form stretched, pulled by the severing connection, fighting to maintain its grip on reality. The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of overtaxed Geller fields and the wheeze of failing life support. Atkins slumped in the command throne, exhaustion hitting like a physical blow. His hands shook with adrenaline aftermath. Is it gone? Olivia asked, though she was already checking sensors, confirming what they both felt, the lifting of that terrible weight, the absence of that watching presence. He checked the navigation readings. Someone else will find that tablet eventually. Then we warn them. Full report to the authorities. Mark this whole region as a navigation hazard. She paused, fingers stilling on the console. Think they'll believe us? Doesn't matter. We know the truth. He met her eyes. Can we make it to port? She ran rapid calculations, factoring in their damaged systems, depleted power reserves, and the jury-rigged modifications holding their reality together. If we're lucky and the patches hold. 2 weeks to Redemption Station on emergency power. Most systems will have to stay offline. It'll be cold, dark, but survivable. 2 weeks. Alone on a dying ship with someone who might be exactly who she appeared to be, or might be something else entirely. The entity was gone, but its gift remained. The knowledge that trust was fragile, that certainty was illusion, that in the dark between stars, worse things than death waited. Olivia, thank you for trusting me, for letting me trust you. She smiled, and it was tired and real and human, the most beautiful thing he'd seen in days. What else could we do? Doubt is death in the end. They worked in companionable silence, preparing their broken ship for the long limp home. But beneath the professional focus, both felt the scars the entity had left. They found themselves checking shadows more often than necessary, hands moving unconsciously toward weapons before catching themselves. Trust had returned, but it was different now. Conscious, deliberate. A choice made moment by moment, rather than an unconscious assumption. They'd learned that anyone could become an enemy given the right pressure, the right fears. But they'd also learned that trust could be rebuilt, one careful stone at a time. The profitable venture limped onward like a wounded animal seeking shelter. Two survivors of a crew of 5, carrying scars that would never fully heal and knowledge that would haunt them forever. The entity was gone. But somewhere in the void, the tablet drifted among the asteroids, waiting for the next desperate crew to find it.